At just after 10 in the evening on July 6, 1988, an explosion tore through the gas compression module of Piper Alpha. The first blast did not destroy the entire platform. For a few minutes, escape was still possible from parts of it. But Piper Alpha was connected to an offshore production network containing far more fuel than the platform itself. As fires damaged those connections, the accident changed from a local gas explosion into an inferno that could not be controlled. There were 226 people on the platform that night. Only 61 survived. 167 men died, including 2 rescuers from a nearby vessel. The public inquiry led by Lord Cullen concluded that the disaster grew from failures of communication and weaknesses in management control. It was not simply the story of a missing component or one operator making a bad decision. Piper Alpha stood in the North Sea about 120 miles northeast of Aberdeen. It began producing oil in 1976. Oil and gas arrived from wells beneath the platform. Equipment separated the mixture, processed it, and sent products through pipelines. Piper was also connected to other installations including the Tartan and Claymore platforms and the manifold compression platform number 1. This arrangement made Piper Alpha part factory, part pumping station, and part accommodation block. Large quantities of flammable material moved through compact modules while people lived and worked nearby. Firewalls divided the production areas, but the platform had originally been designed mainly for oil production. Later modifications introduced gas compression equipment. Gas can spread rapidly through openings and produce explosive pressure, so a layout that could slow an oil fire was not necessarily able to contain a gas explosion. The immediate change began with routine maintenance on one of 2 condensate injection pumps. The pumps were known as Pump A and Pump B. Each had a pressure safety valve connected to its discharge pipe. On the morning of July 6th, workers removed the pressure safety valve from Pump A for scheduled inspection. The open pipe was sealed temporarily with a flat metal blind flange. The pump itself was also unavailable for other maintenance, and separate permits covered the separate jobs. The safety valve permit recorded that the valve had been removed and that the pump must not be operated, but the work was not completed by the end of the day shift. The permit was suspended and placed in the control room. The physical arrangement made the risk less obvious. The safety valve was not beside the body of the pump where an operator looking at Pump A would necessarily see that it was missing. It was above the pump on another level. The temporary blind flange was not visible from the control panel. During the evening, Pump B was running. Then it stopped. The platform needed condensate injection to continue operating, and the night crew tried unsuccessfully to restart it. They began considering Pump A as the available backup. The night shift knew about the maintenance being performed directly on Pump A, but the inquiry found a critical breakdown in the permit to work and handover system. The suspended permit for the removed safety valve was not brought to the attention of the people deciding whether the pump could be used. A search of the permits did not reveal the full condition of the system. The crew believed Pump A could be returned to service. A permit to work system is more than permission to begin a task. It must identify the equipment, isolate the hazard, record the actual condition left in the plant, and transfer that information across people and shifts. If connected jobs are treated as separate pieces of paper, the control room can see an available machine while the pipework attached to it remains unsafe. At approximately 10 in the evening, Pump A was started. Pressure entered pipework that no longer had its safety valve in place. The inquiry considered that condensate escaped from the temporary blind flange, producing a flammable cloud in the gas compression module. The exact ignition source could not be established, but the release ignited. The first explosion damaged equipment and barriers and started several fires. This is the point where a maintenance and communication failure became a major accident problem. The initial release was dangerous, but the energy that destroyed Piper Alpha arrived in stages. The explosion disrupted the control room. Oil continued burning in the production area. The automatic deluge system, designed to spray seawater over equipment, did not control the fire. Its pumps were normally left in manual mode when divers were in the water, to reduce the danger that the seawater intakes might draw them in. Starting the pumps now required someone to reach local controls in conditions that were becoming impossible. Piper Alpha's emergency shutdown stopped much of its own production, but it could not instantly remove the inventory inside long, high-pressure pipelines, nor did it immediately stop other platforms from continuing to send oil and gas through the connected network. Around 20 minutes after the first explosion, heat caused the gas riser from Tartan to fail. Gas under high pressure discharged into the fire. The new jet of flame released energy on a completely different scale. Later, another riser connected to the manifold compression platform failed, followed by the Claymore gas line. Each rupture fed the disaster with more fuel. Operators on connected platforms faced incomplete information and difficult decisions. Shutting down production was not a simple switch, and managers were concerned about the consequences of stopping flows. But the result was that hydrocarbons continued moving toward Piper while it was already burning. The Cullen inquiry made clear that isolation and emergency shutdown arrangements had not been designed to control this kind of network-wide escalation quickly enough. The platform's arrangement then turned damage to process equipment into a survival crisis. Smoke and fire cut off routes. The accommodation block became a gathering point because emergency instructions told personnel to assemble and await direction and helicopter evacuation. But smoke made helicopter rescue impossible, and no effective command emerged to order a general escape. Some men recognized that remaining in the accommodation block was becoming more dangerous than leaving it. They moved through smoke, climbed down the structure, or jumped into the sea from great height. Their actions were improvised, not part of an organized evacuation. 28 men escaped from the accommodation area in this way. When the block was later recovered, 81 bodies were found inside. Rescue crews approached a platform surrounded by fire, falling debris, smoke, and exploding equipment. The standby vessel Silver Pit launched a fast rescue craft. A further explosion killed 2 of its crew. Other vessels and helicopters recovered survivors from the sea. The courage of those rescuers was later recognized by the inquiry, but courage could not compensate for evacuation systems that had become unusable. About 3 hours after the first blast, the central section of Piper Alpha collapsed into the North Sea. The temptation is to describe the probable cause as the decision to start Pump A. That decision was the trigger, but it was made inside a system that failed to communicate the pump's true condition. The day shift and night shift did not share a reliable picture of ongoing maintenance. Separate permits described connected pieces of equipment. The location of the removed valve concealed the hazard. Permit practices that were supposed to control dangerous work did not reliably survive a shift change. The deeper failures were organizational. Lord Cullen found significant flaws in Occidental's management of safety. Senior management was too easily satisfied that safety was being maintained. Training and preparation for a major emergency were inadequate. Inspection concentrated too heavily on individual hardware requirements and not enough on whether the operator's safety management system worked as a whole. There were also weaknesses in design for escalation. Fire and blast separation, protection of critical controls, pipeline isolation, firefighting systems, temporary refuge, evacuation, and rescue had to function together. On Piper Alpha, damage to one part of the platform disabled or overwhelmed other protective layers. The connected pipelines allowed an accident on one installation to keep receiving fuel from an entire production network. The public inquiry made 106 recommendations. Its most influential proposal was a new safety case regime. Instead of treating compliance as a checklist of prescribed equipment, each operator would have to identify the major hazards on its installation, show how the risks were controlled, demonstrate that evacuation and rescue arrangements were credible, and submit that case to an independent regulator. Responsibility for offshore safety moved to the Health and Safety Executive. Operators retained primary responsibility for managing risk, while the regulator reviewed and audited the evidence behind their safety cases. New rules addressed emergency shutdown valves, fire and explosion protection, evacuation, workforce involvement, and the management of offshore installations. Piper Alpha therefore changed more than one permit form. It changed the question that regulators and operators were expected to ask. The old question was whether each specified component and procedure appeared to comply. The new question was whether the complete installation could control its major hazards when several protective layers failed together. If you value investigations built from official evidence, subscribe to Probable Cause Report. The first explosion on Piper Alpha began with a loss of containment after maintenance information failed to reach the people who needed it. But one leak did not predetermine the scale of the disaster. The catastrophe required a platform vulnerable to gas explosion, firefighting that could not respond effectively, pipelines that continued feeding the fire, and an emergency organization unable to lead a timely escape. The probable cause was a chain in which communication, design, operation, and regulation each left the next failure free to grow.